So I'm gonna get super vulnerable with you guys right now. I think I'm gonna share with you a lot of things that are maybe not so flattering about me. You know, things or thoughts that would be socially frowned upon. So I was just diagnosed with ADHD. Now what? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. A reminder to hit my bio if you want to get a free copy of my Hunger Cushion Combo ebook, and also to check out my LTK page for today's fit. Today I'm going to be getting super vulnerable and honest, and I'm going to be telling you how I'm feeling about my recent ADHD diagnosis and also some next steps on this self-discovery journey. So a little bit of a background here. I've struggled with my mental health for basically my whole life. I had bad anxiety since I was a kid. I mean, some of my earliest memories were basically of me crying myself to sleep before a dance competition because I was so afraid of disappointing my coach and even my mom. I always won the trophies and the golds, but I was always so terrified that one day I wouldn't. And I was a really good kid. Like, at least that's what my mom said. She says I was perfect. But you know, I wasn't a troubled kid. I wasn't disruptive. I was a people pleaser. So I just tried really, really, really hard to be good. And honestly, that never went away. I was always a top straight A student all throughout high school and university. I actually graduated at the top of my class with the top GPA in my program. So never, ever, ever did it cross my mind that I had a learning disability like ADHD. Like, to me, ADHD was just like something for hyper little boys who were disruptive in class and who needed extra time on their exams because they were slow. I was definitely not that kid. But there's been a lot of talk about ADHD since the start of the pandemic. And a lot of women are getting diagnosed in their mid-30s who maybe historically have been overlooked just because their symptoms present completely differently than young boys. And this is partially to do with less stigma, more discussion. Like, I feel like our parents definitely did not have as much therapy as we do today. But I think that there's now this whole cohort of 30-something women who've worked really, really hard all their lives to mask their symptoms. And I feel like when we were kids, or even in our 20s, we could do this because we had virtually little to no responsibilities. But now we're adults, and many of us are moms. Many of us had our kids like during the pandemic, which was traumatic as. And basically all the coping strategies that worked when things were comparatively like easier are just not working anymore. So for myself, I feel like it's the combination of owning a thriving business and having 2 kids and a dog and a house all at the same time. It's just created such like psychological chaos that I've just had to kind of relinquish my sense of control, which has basically been the thing that has kept this perfect neurotypical facade going for so long. So I used to be super over the top, on the ball. Like, my motto in university was, if I'm not ahead, I'm behind.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Because basically the thought of needing to catch up on like anything, so school, work, finances, anything, was just so terrifying to me. So I would work like 4 weeks ahead in my schoolwork just to like relieve that anxiety. Also, I would always hoard money for a rainy day. I still do. I'm definitely a money hoarder. And I mean, even when I started working in media, trying to build my business in my early 20s, again, when I didn't have kids, when I didn't have really any responsibilities, it was the same thing, right? My agent would email me, I would reply immediately. They would ask for a piece of content, I would create it that day on the spot. Like, no one ever had to remind me anything, nothing. I was reminding everybody else. But in the past 5 years, I just like started dropping so many balls. And this has created so much more anxiety for me because I have felt so out of control. And it's like every single year, it's just gotten progressively worse. And my overcompensation coping strategies are just no longer working because there are just too many variables to try to control. And it's feeling completely overwhelming. So I want to try to describe to you what it feels like in my brain every day at this point at 35. So basically, somebody emails me and I see it, but almost in like a dreamlike state. There, but it's not quite there. It's not quite computing. And then suddenly something else demands my attention. So it's my kid. I gotta pee. I gotta get a snack. I gotta clean up a spill. I gotta turn off the TV, whatever. And replying to that email is gonzo from my head. And then 2 hours goes by and suddenly I'm like hit with this wave of anxiety that's like, oh my gosh, I have to respond to that email. And my heart rate spikes. I feel like I can't catch my breath. I go to my mailbox, and when I get to my mailbox, I see more emails that distract me, so then I forget again. And this is just one benign task out of hundreds that I have to face in the day. So my day is basically just forgetting, remembering, up, down, here, there. And I'm in this state that is there, but not quite there. And I'm also having all of these mini panic attacks at all hours, including through the night, remembering these things that I have to do. I also have remarkably vivid dreams to the point that I often tell people that I feel like I live a whole other life at night. And when I wake up in the morning, I remember everything. And I often don't know what's real and what's not. I work very hard in the day, and then I feel like I work very hard at night. And it is exhausting. And in the past, I could manage all of this because it was just me. Like all these little demands in my life were all pretty minor. I was a student, no one was emailing me. I didn't have a husband and kids or a house or a dog. I wasn't a business owner overseeing a team of 12 people. But now I kind of feel like I'm in this galaxy of shooting stars that are just like zooming past me constantly. And I don't know which way to look. And sometimes at the end of the day, I just cry out of exhaustion trying to do it all. And my husband is fairly useful, but no offense to men watching, women are just generally the bearer of these burdens, like even in more egalitarian relationships. But anyways, I ended up working with a psychologist. I did like 5 hours of tests. And when I received this diagnosis, I actually breathed a huge sigh of relief. It has been so validating to put all these different pieces together, all my struggles throughout life, things that I felt embarrassed about that, I just couldn't grasp or cope with. And I finally have an explanation for it all. So I'm gonna get super vulnerable with you guys right now. I think I'm gonna share with you a lot of things that are maybe not so flattering about me. Things or thoughts that would be socially frowned upon. But maybe if you recognize yourself in some of these patterns, it might inspire even just one person to reach out for help. So first of all, as I mentioned, it has been incredibly validating to know that all of the psychological diagnoses that I have received in my life can potentially be linked back to ADHD. And that these are not just some kind of like inherent character flaws. It's just how my brain is wired. So for one, I have general anxiety disorder. I basically had this since childhood, and I only started medicating for this over a year ago. And I have to say that it's completely changed my life. And on my recent evaluation with my doctor, she actually said that I no longer even fit the diagnostic criteria for anxiety, basically thanks to medication and all of the years of therapy that I've done, which is amazing. But about 50% of people with ADHD will also have anxiety presenting together, and one can exacerbate the other and vice versa. I also was just diagnosed with something called OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And it's different from OCD because, OCD is often ruled by intrusive thoughts that cause a lot of anxiety. So a person has to perform a lot of these compulsions for relief. So, checking the door handle a bunch of times, checking if you unplug the straightener a bunch of times, or performing any specific rituals in your day. I don't do that. But OCPD is ruled by perfectionism. Other common symptoms of OCPD are things like hoarding money for worst case scenarios, which I am definitely known to do, being over devoted to work and productivity, check, being very stubborn, absolutely stubborn as things like not wanting to delegate tasks out of fear that they won't be done perfectly, guilty, and also this obsession or desire to have all these lists in order to maintain order. Double check. I love me a good list. I told you, these are not flattering parts of my personality. I actually get criticized a lot by, family members, people I know for these things. And you would think that ADHD, which is characterized by like impulsivity, and then OCPD, which is characterized by perfectionism and order, like that these things could never coincide, but apparently they often do. So it's often believed that people with ADHD may adopt OCPD behaviors as a way to try to maintain some order in their lives, or like to try to sustain functioning in academic or different social scenarios, which looking back is absolutely what I've done in my life. I have overcompensated with extreme effort, extreme perfectionism, because I did not want to fail and disappoint others. So in a lot of ways, I guess you could say that my OCPD, even though it's been a huge struggle for me in my life, has also in some ways kind of saved me from some of the downfalls of ADHD. Another interesting comorbidity with ADHD is eating disorders. So this might apply to a lot of you guys watching. So research has shown that girls with ADHD are 4 times more likely to have an eating disorder. Honestly, every single time I even think about these stats, I feel some relief. Like that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't just vain or like easily influenced by media or the movies or other things like that, that I was actually genetically programmed to have these struggles. But restrictive eating disorders are often driven by a lot of this kind of all or nothing dichotomous thinking, which is also a common fixture in folks with ADHD. And in the case of binge eating, we also know that people with ADHD have at least one defective gene that makes it difficult for our neurons to respond to the pleasure hormone dopamine. So we tend to see people with ADHD binge eat or have like really strong desires for super sweet foods because they're constantly looking for that big hit of dopamine that they're lacking. Insomnia is another one. ADHD and insomnia are highly comorbid, especially early morning wake-ups, which is something that I have personally always struggled with. And this has to do with the hyperactivity piece, where my brain and my body just like feel so wired, even though I know that I'm completely run down and exhausted. I still just want to jump out of bed in the morning. There's also a really high risk of addiction in folks with ADHD. So about half of people with untreated ADHD will develop a substance abuse disorder in their lives. In some cases, this is related to the impulsivity tendencies. In some cases, it's to like numb some of those overwhelming or unpleasant symptoms of ADHD. And in other cases, it is to provide that jolt of dopamine that us folks with ADHD are just so desperately seeking. Now, I have always said that I have an addictive personality, which is why I resisted any kind of sleep medications for so long. I've always just been worried it's a slippery slope for me. And I have to be honest, sometimes when I'm not feeling my best psychologically, I feel like I'm in a battle of taking a bit too much, then having to painfully wean myself down, then taking too much, then weaning myself down. It is like physically and mentally draining for me to do this roller coaster. But I'm a rule follower because I guess of the OCPD. So I feel like if I didn't have those tendencies fighting against the ADHD, I might more easily have ended up in a bad place. For less dangerous forms of addiction, I guess. So like, I definitely have a bit of an addiction to online shopping. But again, OCPD, people-pleasing personality. I'm worried about my husband getting mad at me. So that definitely reins me in a little bit. I also think one of the reasons that I chose this job of working in media, specifically social media, is that I guess I crave the constant dopamine hits that you get from every little piece of content that goes out. Like people are always saying social media is creating these dopamine junkies. Like we're constantly craving those little hits all day long. I know it's not good for me, but at least I now understand a little bit more about my life choices. Hold that thought, I'm gonna pop these little frittatas in the oven. Some other things that I know about myself that I can now associate with this diagnosis are things like my forgetfulness. I am so forgetful. If I remember something, I absolutely have to deal with it right then and there, or it will just like float in my subconscious, haunting me without me fully being able to acknowledge what it is. It is really debilitating. I also fidget and move all day long. I have never been able to just sit on the beach. I can't lay in bed in the morning. I leap out of the bed in the morning. I can't even go for a massage for more than 30 minutes because I am so antsy. And I move and I tap my fingers constantly. Makes my husband crazy. I am always like playing music, like a piano with my fingers. And the other interesting thing is I always take my business calls and my therapy walking on the treadmill or walking outside. And this is even something that my therapist in her evaluation noted down, because I find that when I'm taking calls sitting down, I just can't listen. I feel so distracted with everything else in the room around me. I want to doodle, I want to check an email, I want to see what the dog's doing. I can hear every other sound. I cannot concentrate. Whereas when I'm walking and talking, I can actually just zone in on what that person is saying. And apparently, exercise is one of the biggest recommendations for folks with ADHD. Not only because it helps to supply dopamine, which again is kind of naturally lower, but it's also been shown to help improve executive functioning. It improves impulsivity, reduces aggression, improves memory, lots more. So I guess I just instinctually knew that exercise kind of gave me a rhythm to fall into so that I could concentrate more on the task at hand. Another less flattering Abbey quirk is that I'm a really bad listener. You know that meme on TikTok of the cat just like zoning out? I laugh every single time I see one of those videos because I can relate to every single one of them. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. But I recently noticed this is an issue because I started taking tennis lessons as an adult. And this is probably the first time that I've had to be taught anything as an adult because I'm my own boss, so normally people aren't explaining to me what to do. But with tennis, I cannot listen to my instructor. There are just so many distractions. There are balls, there are kids in the park, there are kids playing, there are other people playing. I'm like completely overwhelmed. So yeah, it's not going as well as I'd like it to. But even though I like think back to how I was in school, and even though I got really good grades, I was never an auditory learner. I also am not one to stare at a screen or a book all day. That is also torture to me. But what I would do is I'd be very hyper focused in class, which is another ADHD characteristic, and I would copy down what was said verbatim, and then I would go home and I basically learn it by memorization. I actually have a photographic memory. And then once the new stuff was memorized, I would quickly review everything else from the weeks and lectures before that I'd memorized. And I think I did this because I would never be able to sit long enough or concentrate long enough to just cram for an exam the night before like most of my friends. Never. And this was obviously my silent ADHD. But yeah, the hyper-focusing, that is not just with work or school. My husband always says I have tunnel vision. He always jokes that if I had a task or something to do, that I would just steamroll an old granny and not even notice just so I could get to the finish line. Again, not flattering, but also a super common ADHD trait. So yes, I am very good at getting it done, but ask my husband, I don't do anything except for my work because I'm very passionate about it. I'm very thorough and I'm a perfectionist. But if I'm given a task that I'm not so passionate about, I will botch it up. It will be sloppy as Like my husband knows that he cannot give me a household task because I will do it, but I will do it hastily to get it done. Whereas he would spend months researching options and prices to get the best possible option. I have zero patience for that. I just want it done. And there are so many other challenges that, I have faced in my life that I know now are simply related to my brain structure and function and chemistry, including that dysregulation of the dopamine system. When you learn about the different comorbidities with ADHD, it is really scary. Like, especially as a mom, knowing that ADHD is like 75 to 90% hereditary, which means that if I have ADHD, there is a high chance that one or both my kids will also. But I also see how I turned out, and I'm very high functioning and successful and resilient despite all of the hardships that I've had to face. And I actually read Paris Hilton's memoir, which was amazing, by the way, in my opinion. And she talks a lot about having ADHD and how her her ADHD ended up being like a real superpower for her. Clearly, the girl's doing all right. So I too am just trying to see, the benefits in this. But research actually suggests that ADHD folks have a lot of great traits. Problem solvers, demonstrate perseverance and resilience. They're great multitaskers. They have really strong morals, and they tend to be more empathetic and sensitive and accepting and funny and entrepreneurial and energetic and courageous. And I feel like I identify with all of these things. And I also feel like these traits have been essential to my success in life. And there's also a ton of super successful and smart neurospicy celebrities. So John Lennon, Emma Watson, Justin Timberlake, Ryan Gosling, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps, Walt Disney, Mozart, Einstein, Da Vinci, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, like just to name a few. These are literally some of the most important minds of all time. So I am choosing to see being neurodivergent as this amazing superpower, like definitely one with struggles, but also one that will open up new windows of opportunity because I am able to see the world in this unique and multi-layered way. And I think my frittatas are ready. Anyway, I'm not really sure what's next for me on this journey. I actually have not decided if I'm going to medicate or when or how much or with what. Like I'm still meditating on that. But for now, I feel like this has been a really validating experience. And as I said, I'm choosing to see this as a superpower and a blessing. But if you guys want more videos on ADHD, I would love to hear from you. I'm sure I have a lot of neurospicy folks in my community, so please speak up and say hello. And on that note, that's all that I have for you guys today. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.